Ensuring ethical use of AI in the radio and podcasting industry. As the use of AI in the radio and podcasting industry becomes more widespread, it is important to ensure that its use is ethical and responsible. Here are some best practices for ensuring ethical use of AI in the industry. Transparency. Radio stations and podcasters should be transparent about their use of AI and how it is being used to collect and analyze data. This includes informing listeners about what data is being collected and how it is being used. Privacy. It is important to protect the privacy of listeners and ensure that any data collected is being used in accordance with applicable privacy laws and regulations. Bias. AI algorithms can be biased, so it is important to regularly monitor and evaluate their outputs to ensure that they are not perpetuating bias or discrimination. Human oversight. While AI can be incredibly useful, it should not replace human decision-making entirely. It is important to have human oversight in place to ensure that AI is being used responsibly and ethically. Training. Those responsible for implementing and managing AI systems should receive training on the ethical considerations of AI and how to ensure its responsible use. Continuous evaluation. Radio stations and podcasters should regularly evaluate their use of AI to ensure that it is ethical, effective, and in line with their values. By following these best practices, radio stations and podcasters can ensure that their use of AI is ethical and responsible, which can help build trust with their audiences and ultimately lead to long-term success. Protecting audience privacy when using AI. As radio stations and podcasters increasingly rely on AI for audience data analysis and personalized content, it is important to ensure that audience privacy is protected. Here are some best practices for protecting audience privacy when using AI. Data security. Radio stations and podcasters should implement strong security measures to protect audience data from unauthorized access, use, or disclosure. Anonymization. Audience data should be anonymized wherever possible, removing personally identifiable information such as names or addresses. Limited data collection. Only collect audience data that is necessary for the specific use case and avoid collecting more data than is needed. Consent. Obtain clear and explicit consent from listeners before collecting and using their data. This includes informing them of how their data will be used and giving them the option to opt out. Opt-out mechanisms. Provide listeners with clear and accessible mechanisms to opt out of data collection and usage. Regular audits. Conduct regular audits of data collection and usage practices to ensure that audience privacy is being protected. By implementing these best practices, radio stations and podcasters can demonstrate their commitment to protecting audience privacy when using AI. This can help build trust with listeners and ultimately lead to increased engagement and loyalty. Legal considerations when using AI in the radio and podcasting industry. As the use of AI becomes more prevalent in the radio and podcasting industry, it is important to consider the legal implications of its use. Here are some key legal considerations to keep in mind. Data privacy laws. Radio stations and podcasters must comply with data privacy laws such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, when collecting and using audience data. Intellectual property rights. It is important to ensure that the use of AI does not infringe on the intellectual property rights of others, including copyrighted content or trademarks. Liability. Radio stations and podcasters must be aware of potential liability arising from the use of AI, such as if the AI algorithm results in discriminatory practices or if there is a data breach. Transparency. To avoid misleading listeners, it is important to clearly disclose the use of AI in content creation and advertising. Contractual obligations. Contracts with third-party AI providers must be carefully reviewed to ensure that they meet legal requirements and protect the interests of the radio station or podcaster. By keeping these legal considerations in mind, radio stations and podcasters can minimize legal risks and ensure compliance with relevant laws and regulations. It is important to consult with legal professionals to ensure that all legal requirements are met when using AI in the industry.